The cost of a bottle of scotch, $50. The price of betraying the world's most notorious motorcycle club, $300,000. Living the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, priceless. Meet Anthony Tait, the man who turned bar bets into federal cases and brotherhood into betrayal.
My name's Anthony Tait. I penetrated into the Hells Angels motorcycle gang in the mid-'80s.
It is the biker's drug. They control that drug.
Anthony Tait, seen here in disguise, was a national officer in the Hells Angels, and for nearly 3 years, the FBI's principal informant inside the club.
In biker circles, certain names are only whispered. Sonny Barger commands reverence. Cisco Valderrama inspires fear. But mention Tony Tait, and watch the atmosphere transform instantly from camaraderie to contempt.
Mr. Tait is a paid informant working for the FBI, and he earns his wages by giving the FBI information that they need and they want.
The half-Filipino bouncer from Anchorage, who infiltrated America's most exclusive outlaw fraternity, managed something extraordinary. He walked among Hells Angels wearing 2 recording devices while rising to become their West Coast point man. What kind of man betrays 500 brothers for government cash? What kind of agent encourages bombing plots just to record the responses? And what happens when the most successful informant in American history runs out of places to hide? Some betrayals, like good whiskey, only get more potent with time. Anthony John Tait wasn't born a rat. That special talent developed over time, nurtured by circumstance and ambition. Born May 27, 1954, Tait inherited more than just his father's name. Samuel Gordon Tait, a Scotsman who served as a British Army intelligence officer in World War II, and later in Mandatory Palestine, bequeathed his son the calculated arts of observation, reconnaissance, and perhaps most importantly, deception. While other fathers taught their boys to fish, Samuel taught young Tony how to watch and listen, skills that would later prove devastatingly effective against the wrong targets. The Tait family transplanted to Alaska's frozen landscape in 1960, where Tony grew into a man who couldn't quite find his place.
My dad was in the British Army, working in intelligence, and during his time in the Middle East, there had been a contract placed on him. We moved to a small town in Alaska, and my father taught me about observation and reconnaissance and intelligence work. I wanted to be in the military, and I wanted to do long-range reconnaissance.
His military aspirations led to enlistment in 1971, yet culminated in an undesirable discharge just 3 years later. A pattern of not quite belonging that would follow him, even as he managed to infiltrate America's most exclusive motorcycle club. By the late 1970s, Tait had settled into the muscled monotony of bouncing at Anchorage strip clubs, where leather-clad bikers frequently rolled through, intimidating patrons and staff alike. These encounters might have remained forgettable confrontations had Tait not developed an unusual hobby, collecting information on these outlaw bikers for his police officer drinking buddies.
The late 70s, I started bouncing in a group of nightclubs in downtown Anchorage. While I was working, I got to know some of the motorcycle gang members. They would come into a club, brutalize customers, brutalize the dancers. I didn't like what was going on.
Then came that fateful dinner in 1983, the one where whiskey and wounded ego collided to produce history's most expensive bar bet.
I was having dinner with a couple of police officer friends, and I said, you know, you guys have had ample opportunity to investigate these bikers, and you haven't done anything.
The Hells Angels were under investigation for distributing meth and for murder.
Meth, crystal, speed, ice are some of its street names. It is more potent than cocaine and cheaper to buy. And while cocaine comes mainly from Latin America, methamphetamine is made here in the USA, manufactured with over-the-counter chemicals and processed here in clandestine laboratories. And unlike the Latin American cocaine cartel, The methamphetamine distribution network is made in the USA, too. Who are its principal distributors?
Tait challenged his law enforcement companions, the alcohol amplifying his bravado.
That I could get into the Anchorage Hells Angels. They said, I'll bet you can't. And I was taken up on the bet.
The stakes?
The wager was a bottle of Scotch whiskey.
The bikers would have preferred Russian roulette. At least, those odds would have been better than what was coming. What begins with a drunken wager rarely ends with FBI codenames and wiretapped pagers. Tait managed this precise career trajectory with alarming efficiency. Having tossed his bold challenge onto the table, Tait wasted no time infiltrating the Anchorage Hells Angels.
I needed to get closer to them and make them comfortable with me.
Tony went to the police and said, I'm going to infiltrate these guys. And he didn't do it because he thought it was an honorable thing to do. Let's be honest about this. He did it for his ego. He did it because he figured he could write a book. He figured he could get a movie. And he did it for money.
The Hells Angels, the oldest and largest motorcycle club in the United States. Well known as a fraternity of rebels, a gang of outlaw bikers, but not as well known as the allegation by the U.S. Department of Justice.
He started by befriending club members at local watering holes, whereupon his natural swagger, combined with a newfound commitment to hanging around, quickly elevated him from curiosity to prospect. Meanwhile, every handshake, every beer shared, every confidence exchanged went straight into meticulous reports for his police handler friends. By July 1983, barely 6 months after his Barstool boast, Tait had achieved the unthinkable. A prospect in the Anchorage chapter.
And about 6 to 7 months later, they made me a prospect. In July of 1983, they made me a Hells Angel member.
Tony Tait got a pass because Paul Hibbets thought he was a stand-up guy.
The bottle of scotch was his, though his police buddies soon discovered they'd created a monster with an appetite larger than Alaska itself. Supplying information to the Anchorage Police Department proved merely an appetizer for Tait's growing hunger.
Essentially, we just started gathering information from my law enforcement friends. On a day-to-day basis, I would see everything from drug dealing, stolen motorcycles, abuse, beatings.
Small-town cops couldn't satisfy his expanding ambitions, nor could they afford his increasingly expensive services. The FBI, however, could offer both prestige and a significant pay upgrade.
I would take everything that I got and then I'd sit down with one or both of the PD officers and we'd discuss what had happened. There was just so much intelligence that we actually agreed that we needed to get the FBI involved.
Enter Special Agent Tim McKinley, the Bureau's dedicated Hells Angel specialist, who recognized in Tait the perfect blend of insider access and moral flexibility. McKinley would later describe his prized informant as possessing an ego the size of Montana, which, considering Alaska's comparative landmass, was actually a size downgrade for Tait.
One of the things that got explained to him was, we're going to be recording everything you do to the extent that it is humanly possible.
Obviously, the interest was who could he infiltrate and what could he tell us about the club.
And whether that was something that he was interested in. He said absolutely that he wanted to put as many of them in prison as he could.
Their partnership birthed Operation Cacus, named after the soul-stealing centaur in Dante's Inferno, a fitting nod to what Tait was doing to his brothers.
The investigation using Tait was codenamed Operation Cacus. Everything was kept very close to the vest.
Within a very short period of time, he was a Hells Angel. He had the mentality, he had everything. It's just that he was ratting them out.
For $1,500 monthly, Tait transformed from mere club member to high-tech surveillance system on 2 wheels.
We settled on that he would get paid $1,500 a month.
A walking electronics platform was McKinley's technical term for his asset, though exceptionally well-paid Traitor would have been equally accurate.
Anthony Tait was critical to the investigation because he was the vehicle through which law enforcement was able to get inside the inner workings of the Hells Angels.
Tait never attended meetings with fewer than 2 recording devices, lest one malfunction, plus a specially bugged pager that captured conversations even when he stepped away. George Christie, then president of the Ventura chapter, later marveled at Tait's performance. He once asked him for connections to sell drugs.
Tony Tait shows up in Ventura. He asked me to set him up in the drug business. Now, he complained, he cried, he sniveled, he said he was going broke. Someone's got to help him. Now, not being in the drug business, I informed him, no, I cannot help you, sorry.
What do you think he was trying to do, entrap you?
Absolutely.
Indeed, Tony was dealing with something, just not what anyone suspected. Some men climb corporate ladders. Anthony Tait scaled the ranks of outlaw motorcycle culture with a recording device tucked into his underwear. Through a masterclass in method acting, Tait didn't merely infiltrate the Hells Angels. He excelled within their ranks.
I feel some of the skills needed to do undercover work and intelligence work is you need a calm demeanor.
Despite his complete absence of loyalty or authentic brotherhood, he nonetheless possessed a chameleon-like ability to mirror the swagger, aggression, and calculated violence that earned respect in the club. In fact, his performances became so convincing that even seasoned members who prided themselves on sensing danger failed to detect the federal wire beneath his leather vest. Particularly ingenious was his cultivation of a straight-edge persona amid a culture swimming in chemical indulgence.
Tony Tait was a bit obsessed, actually, with wanting to be a police officer, wanting to do good. And it sort of like dovetails into this passion/obsession with helping law enforcement.
While fellow angels numbed themselves with whatever substances crossed their palms, Tait maintained pristine sobriety, a shrewd tactical choice that ensured his recordings remained intelligible and his memory razor-sharp for detailed debriefings.
I knew that if they were gone, there'd be a lot less crime. That was my motive, was to put them completely out of business.
At restaurants, he'd ostentatiously order multiple entrees, take 2 bites of each, then pass them around. Similarly, he'd reject perfectly good bottles of wine to demonstrate his exacting standards and financial largesse. I was the high-rolling guy that didn't do drugs and took care of myself, Tait later boasted, conveniently omitting that his extravagance came courtesy of taxpayer dollars, funneled through the FBI's confidential informant budget.
The operation was to take out the major manufacturers and the people that were running the Hells Angel motorcycle gang. We went after Sonny Barger, we went after Kenny Owen.
Kenny had been taught how to manufacture methamphetamine by a Shell oil chemist, so he knew very well how to manufacture methamphetamine.
His meth was, people always say pure, it's pretty hard to get 100%, but that was the rumor, that his meth was the best.
Such calculated performances bore abundant fruit, seeing as, by 1986, Tait had remarkably ascended to become the club's West Coast point man.
The persona we created was a high-roller drug dealer.
You have to give the Hells Angels something they expect to see. We weren't buying street-level drugs, so street knowledge wasn't gonna cut it. He had to know the mid to upper level range of transactions, dealing in multi-pounds and multi-kilos. The Bureau of Narcotics agents had the current prices, the current slang words, and they shared that with Tait.
This privileged position granted him unfettered access to nearly every Hells Angels chapter worldwide, each visit providing a goldmine of incriminating evidence, each conversation captured by his ever-present dual recording devices. Yet despite these impressive inroads, Tait's most spectacular coup involved gaining the confidence of Sonny Barger himself, the legendary Oakland president whose tactical brilliance had previously kept him beyond law enforcement's reach for decades. That such a seasoned criminal mastermind failed to detect the microphone-equipped rat drinking his beer and sitting at his table speaks volumes about either Tait's exceptional deception skills or perhaps, more damningly, about the blind spots created by Barger's own outsized ego. In the world of high-stakes informant operations, timing is everything. And sometimes, a well-timed murder creates the perfect opportunity. When Hell's Angel John Webb met his violent end at the hands of Outlaws Motorcycle Club members in Louisville, Kentucky, on August 12, 1986, nobody could have predicted this tragedy would become the linchpin in bringing down Sonny Barger. Nevertheless, as Webb's body cooled, a chain of events unfolded that would heat up federal wiretaps across the country. Barger, seeking revenge with the calculated precision that had kept him relatively untouchable for decades, made what was perhaps his most consequential mistake. Tony Tait asked for permission to bomb the Outlaws, and Barger made a big mistake agreeing with Tait.
And as soon as the meeting started, got in general business, he wanted me to give him permission to go to Kentucky and bomb the Outlaws. And the biggest red flag in the world, why did Tony Tait need permission from a room full of Hell's Angel presidents to go bomb the Outlaws in Kentucky? If he really was that dedicated, he would have gotten his fucking car and went and took care of business, and I've never said a word to anybody. That's the way the real guys do it. You're talking about old school guys, whether they're Hell's Angels, outlaws, banditos, pagans, Mongols, whatever. I mean, these guys go out, do that shit on their own. They're putting in overtime, and they're not asking for no fucking awards.
One can almost imagine McKinley's stunned delight upon hearing this news. Akin to a fisherman discovering his target fish, had voluntarily jumped into the boat, then helpfully pointed out all its friends. The 400-pound gorilla that just ripped our ass, was how McKinley later described this development. Indeed, the appointment created significant legal complications, seeing as informants cannot participate in violent crimes, nor can their handlers permit murders to occur. Yet somehow, this 400-pound legal gorilla transformed from liability into the foundation for Barger's eventual conviction. With his new authority, Tait attended an Oakland chapter meeting just 5 days after Webb's murder, whereupon Barger shared something extraordinary, a secret book of intelligence on outlaw leaders, complete with home addresses and identification numbers sourced directly from the El Paso Information Center, an official police intelligence database. One Hell's Angel chapter president helpfully noted the book would be useful in setting out targets, while federal agents listening through Tait's wire discovered that police corruption ran deeper than previously imagined. During subsequent meetings, Tait employed a remarkably uncomplicated strategy: propose outlandishly violent plans while recording the responses. This culminated on October 18, 1987, when a visibly nervous Tait, after downing several whiskey shots for courage, presented Barger with plans to bomb an outlaws clubhouse in Chicago. There might be innocent people there, Tait cautioned on tape, delivering a line that could have come straight from an FBI scriptwriter. Barger's fateful response: "That's what they get for hanging around with guys like that."
Sonny likes confrontation, so he's the likely guy to go to. He goes over and he said, "Sonny, I want to blow these guys up. I want to make it big. There could be collateral damage." And Sonny says, "That would be great. The more people hurt, the better." I mean, he just got Sonny. He just took it, hook, line, and sinker.
23 days later, federal agents arrested Barger for conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence? Tait's recordings and Barger's own words. They say the moment before the catastrophe is eerily peaceful. A theory 38 Hell's Angels simultaneously tested on November 10, 1987, when federal agents came knocking with warrants, not courtesy calls. As dawn broke across biker households nationwide, the synchronized raids unfolded with military precision. Meanwhile, in safe houses across the country, FBI agents meticulously prepared Anthony Tait for his final performance. No longer would he play the loyal brother in leather. Henceforth, he would assume his most challenging role yet: government witness. For 6 excruciating weeks, Tait occupied the witness stand, methodically dismantling an organization that had trusted him with his innermost secrets. Hour after hour, he unwound detailed testimony about drug networks, violence, and internal politics, while former brothers glared from the gallery. Their expressions are somewhere between murderous rage and stunned disbelief. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had built his reputation on being trustworthy now built the government's case on proving himself correct. "The club calls me Tony Truth," he declared from the stand with astounding audacity.
When you have a case as good as we did, the only thing you can do is attack the individual's credibility. In each case, what I said was exactly the truth. That's why the club calls me Tony Truth. I murdered them with the truth.
The defense, desperately seeking to undermine his credibility, called his ex-wife Brenda Lee Fowler to the stand. She proved remarkably forthcoming, describing her former husband as a liar, a scumbag, and a cheater who engaged in substance abuse, domestic violence, and, in a particularly bizarre detail, regularly conversed with his dead father's ashes. Though these revelations might normally devastate a witness's credibility, the mountain of recorded evidence rendered Tait's personal flaws largely irrelevant. When the gavel finally fell, Sonny Barger, the legend who had outmaneuvered law enforcement for decades, found himself sentenced to 59 months in federal prison.
If Tony Tait hadn't been an informant, he probably would have picked up a case because he picked up a really bad cocaine habit. A lot of his testimony was discredited in court. He was under the influence of coke. He got caught lying several times. There were mistrials. But he also was very effective. He got some people 40-year sentences.
Yet he represented merely the prized trophy in Tait's collection. All told, over 500 people eventually faced conviction based on evidence he provided, cementing his status as arguably the most effective informant in American history. George Christie, who had sensed something off about Tait from their first encounter, later summarized the collective sentiment of every Hell's Angel.
"No, Tony, we never called you Tony Truth. You never killed us with the truth. You're full of fucking shit." And the guys that got busted, they set themselves up because they believed in you and they thought you were a brother, man. Wasn't like you did some spectacular police work. You're not a cop. You've never been a cop. You're a fucking rat.
A rat indeed, but one who got paid $300,000 for his cheese. In the high-stakes game of betrayal, even the winners must eventually cash out their chips and leave the table. For Anthony John Tait, cashing out meant $300,000 in federal funds, a new identity courtesy of the Witness Protection Program, and a one-way ticket to somewhere far from the rumble of Harley-Davidsons. Reports vary, though most sources suggest he crossed the Atlantic to build his new life in Europe, perhaps ironically returning to his father's homeland, where the arts of deception were first passed down through Tait family traditions.
Anthony Tait has been relocated and given a new identity through the U.S. Witness Protection Program because, says the FBI, there is a murder contract out on him. The Hells Angels deny any knowledge of it.
The FBI naturally celebrated Operation Cactus as an unparalleled success. From their perspective, Tait had accomplished what armies of agents had failed to do for decades: penetrate in the inner sanctum of America's most notorious motorcycle club and deliver its leadership directly to federal prison. For an organization that measures wins in convictions and seized assets, Tait's 500-plus conviction count stands as a towering achievement beyond compare. Behind private doors at FBI headquarters, certain ethical questions lingered uncomfortably. Had Tait merely documented criminal conspiracies, or had he actively created them? Had he discovered plans for violence, or had he suggested them while conveniently recording the responses? These nuanced distinctions remain largely unexplored in official reports, though they certainly haunted the dreams of several defense attorneys. Meanwhile, the Hells Angels, resilient as ever, adapted and evolved. Barger's imprisonment created power vacuums and realignments, however, rather than destroying the organization. Tait's betrayal instilled a new layer of paranoia and security consciousness that made future infiltrations nearly impossible. In the strangest of ironies, his actions ultimately strengthened the very organization he had sought to dismantle. As for his former brothers, they incorporated Tait into their rich mythology, not as a hero, certainly, but as the archetypal villain against which loyalty is measured. His name became shorthand for treachery itself. Pulling a Tait entered club vernacular as the ultimate sin, while prospect indoctrination now includes detailed study of his methods as immunization against future betrayals. Some legends suggest a standing contract remains open for information on Tait's whereabouts, though the Hells Angels officially deny any ongoing interest in the man. Whether such rumors contain truth matters less than their psychological impact. Tait, now in his early 70s, likely still startles at the sound of motorcycles, peers suspiciously at leather-clad men, and checks his rearview mirror more often than most. Perhaps that's justice enough. The rat who spent years recording others must now live permanently on his own personal surveillance tape, starring as both the watched and the watcher, forever unable to edit out his past or stop the recording. Because some betrayals, like certain tape recordings, never truly stop playing.